for a vote on this Brexit withdrawal agreement will be the 21st of January. That's when she needs to get it passed in the UK Parliament. It's important to note that while this deal has ripped her own Conservative Party apart to the point where she's had to face down a no confidence vote, it's also hated by many of the other political parties in the United Kingdom as well. Those who are in favour of remaining within the European Union saying that this deal just basically is nowhere near as good as staying a member of the EU. There's a long way to go. It looks like at this summit she'll get some sort of political agreements from the other leaders, but perhaps not enough to get back to her MPs and get this vote going through a vote in the Parliament. We'll just have to wait and see. It's a very difficult moment for British politics. The European Union 27 are saying that this deal is not up for renegotiation.
All right, that's Jack Parrock reporting from Brussels. Thank you for your insights. Europe has been facing a growing wave of political uncertainty, and there's also been a rising tide of nationalism as the leadership from countries such as Britain, France, and Germany struggle to contain serious challenges. Asta Tall looks at whether Europe's old guard is capable of withstanding this wave of new ideals. Let's take a look.
Theresa May just narrowly escaped a vote of no confidence by her own government. While her leadership survived this challenge, May has given indications she will step down before the country's next general election. And she still faces the task of reassuring her government enough to push through the Brexit deal. Elsewhere, German Chancellor Angela Merkel has handed over her party's leadership positions. French President Emmanuel Macron is also facing off the so-called Yellow Vest protesters, who are calling for a living wage and his resignation. While Macron has made concessions to protesters, such as raising the minimum wage and eliminating the fuel taxes, protests continue to take place across France. Britain, France, and Germany, once the models of stability in EU leadership, now seem to be facing serious political jolts. Meanwhile, nationalist governments in Poland and Italy have become outspoken critics of EU policy. Poland's government has rejected the European Union's migration quotas. The country's president, Andrzej Duda, went as far to call the EU an imaginary community. Italy's Prime Minister Giuseppe Conte's government has taken a hardline stance on immigration, turning away boats carrying refugees from its ports. Conte rode into power on a wave of anger against austerity measures. His government's fiscal plan to lower the budget deficit to 2.4% was rejected by the European Commission for breaching the body's Stability and Growth Pact. The Italian Prime Minister is now in negotiations with the EU. With Britain looking to exit, France and Germany facing domestic pressures, it remains to be seen if the brash new voices will overshadow the old order. Asta Tall, CGTN.
South Africa's former president, Jacob Zuma, has been ordered to personally pay for costs related to his fraud and corruption case. The High Court in Pretoria handed down judgment on the application by opposition parties to set aside an earlier agreement authorizing state funding for Zuma's defense in criminal cases. CGTN's Yolisa Njamela has more.
It's a serious blow for former President Jacob Zuma. Zuma will now have to pay up millions of rands. The judge instructed that the state attorney must compile a full and complete accounting of legal costs incurred by Zuma in his personal capacity. To also take all necessary steps, including the institution of civil proceedings, to cover the legal amounts paid by the state for Zuma's legal costs. The state's attorney was also ordered by the court to compile a report within 3 months on what has been done and what is still to be done to recover the amounts paid by the state thus far for the former president's court case. The verdict has essentially overturned a 2006 agreement Zuma signed with former President Thabo Mbeki. That agreement stated that government would pay Zuma's legal costs in his corruption, fraud, and money laundering cases. Political analyst Gideon Chitanga says this is a precedent-setting case.
The outcome sets a good precedent. If you look at South Africa currently, the country is losing a lot of money through corruption. There are serious cases of alleged corruption at various high levels of the state and even within the private sector. So I think the idea that a message is a clear, explicit message is sent to those in power to say that if you abuse public resources or if you engage in illicit activities, then you are personally liable. It might be such a good deterrent to protect and punish corruption in society.
Zuma's legal representatives had argued that government or public interest is automatically implicated when an official is criminally charged. The court rejected that argument, saying the charges against Zuma had nothing to do with performing his roles in public office.
The case has very crucial implications for good governance in the sense of holding former public officials and those who are in office accountable in making sure that they do not abuse office, and that if they abuse office, then they will take personal liability and responsibility in terms of dealing with any cases of misuse of power in office.
In September, South Africa's presidency stated that Zuma's personal legal fees had cost the state 60 million rand. The court also criticized Zuma for appointing and enriching his private attorneys rather than defending cases through the state attorney's office.
I don't think he was prepared for this outcome, and I'm not sure he has the money himself available to immediately pay up the legal costs or to refund the taxpayers or the government the money that he used to pay his defense team. So clearly he might be on one end buying time to just get time to mobilize the resources that are needed to pay up this money. On the other end, he would need to obviously digest this outcome and come to terms with it.
Zuma is likely to appeal this ruling. Yolisa Njamela for CGTN in Pretoria, South Africa.
Let's go to Nigeria now, where the largest and most successful youth movements is seeking to empower young candidates from various political parties ahead of the 2019 general elections. CGTN's Thuli Shabalala has more on this.
A three-day event brought the largest gathering of young politicians in Nigeria. It is supported by the United Kingdom Department for International Development. Delegates include young lawmakers from various countries in Africa, development partners, academics, and members for civil societies.
If the population of the entire continent, the entire country, or the entire world is made up of 77% of them being youth, and we are not being represented in leadership positions, of course, then there's a question mark. So I'm very happy looking at the number here, and I'm just hoping that out of the 400, we can have over 300 candidates winning, over 300 candidates winning from the 400 candidates presented so far.
The event had 12 talk sessions and 6 master classes. It's a platform to inspire young candidates and empower them with skills they need to navigate Nigeria's often hostile political environment.
Why Nigeria is at the stage it is today is because the old people are still being recycled. Their ideas are what is still working. So the Not Too Young to Run is actually a platform that promotes young people to emerge.
The Not Too Young to Run has just been a platform to open up, has given up the space for young people to be able to get into it. But when you're coming into it as a young person, you need to come with something. You need to come with commitment. You need to come with strength of character. You need to come with some form of accountability.
In May, President Buhari signed into law a bill that reduced the age limit for candidates seeking elective offices. The age limit for candidates for president was lowered from 40 to 35 and for governorship positions from age 35 to 30. The move has accommodated more young people who hope to steer the country in a good direction in governance and nation building. Thuli Shabalala, CGTN.
South African Deputy President David Mabuza and South Sudan President Salva Kiir held a consultative meeting in Pretoria. The two leaders discussed the peace deal between Salva Kiir and South Sudan's rebel leader Riek Machar, which was signed in September 2018. CGTN's Yolisa Njamela has more.
This visit comes after a visit made by South Africa's Deputy President David Mabuza last week to Uganda, Kenya and Sudan. Mabuza met with the heads of states of those countries to discuss efforts to establish lasting peace and stability in the newest country on the continent, South Sudan. At this Pretoria meeting, Mabuza reiterated South Africa's continued and unwavering support to the implementation of the peace agreement. According to South Africa's presidency, the two leaders further discussed progress made towards the establishment of the transitional government of national unity, as envisioned in the revitalized agreement on the resolution of the conflict in South Sudan. In September 2018, all parties and key stakeholders signed the revitalized agreement on the resolution of the conflict in the Republic of South Sudan. This peace deal is a roadmap towards cessation of hostilities, building of democratic institutions, provision of humanitarian assistance, and establishing peace and stability in South Sudan. Yolisa Njamela for CGTN in Pretoria, South Africa.
Here in Kenya, a multi-million-dollar building that was to serve as a hotel was demolished in the country's capital, Nairobi, after officials said it posed a security threat to embassies adjacent to it. Foreign missions had in the past written to local authorities protesting its construction. The demolition came a day after a court issued orders allowing the local government to bring down the property.
Government bulldozers began pulling down the structure behind me at about 5 a.m. on Thursday morning in this high-end neighborhood that houses both the UN complex and the U.S. Embassy. Local authorities say that the building is a security risk to embassies within the neighborhood. They say that the developers had been given approval for only 2 floors but went up to 4 floors. The developers had rushed to court on Wednesday, seeking to stop the imminent demolition of the building, but the court ruled it had no jurisdiction over the matter. Over the last few months, several buildings in Nairobi have been pulled down after officials said they had been put up illegally. At least 4,000 buildings have been earmarked for this exercise. The owner of the building, a billionaire businessman, has yet to make a statement. But the government says this exercise is proof of its resolve to fight corruption. Robert Nagilo, CGTN, Nairobi, Kenya.
The government of Ghana has signed a $12 million deal with U.S.-based logistics company Zipline to use drones in the delivery of blood and other medical supplies to rural communities. But concerns are being raised by the Ghana Medical Association that the deal does not conform to the existing primary health care
applies to rural areas in the country has sparked controversy over the last few days. The minority in parliament raised red flags over the deal when it was first laid before the House, saying the $12 million contract has been inflated. They also argued the deal was a misplaced priority. But when legislators voted on the controversial deal, 102 of them agreed and 58 dissented. This gives the government the green light to implement the deal, despite calls by the Ghana Medical Association to suspend the contract.
In our view, there are critical areas of the existing health structure that need
that we are capable of packaging a persuasive and convincing proposal for corporate Ghana. It is our belief that we do have responsive corporate institutions in this country that are minded about the health of Ghanaians and are willing to contribute to the cost.
The drone supplier Zipline says the contract with Ghana is fair and it's actually cheaper than the service provided to Rwanda, which was the first country in the world to integrate drones into their healthcare system in 2016. Nabil Ahmed Rufai, CGTN, Accra, Ghana.
All right, let's go to Uche for the latest business news.
Thanks, Richard. And coming up on Africa Live Biz. Nigeria seeks $1.1 billion in a suit against Shell and Italy's Eni. And Zimbabwe's President Emerson Mnangagwa lauds growing ties with China.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that.
The OPL 245 oil field is also embroiled in a separate ongoing graft criminal trial in Milan, in which Shell and Eni officials are facing corruption charges. Now, Dan Etete, former Nigerian Minister of Petroleum, has been adversely implicated. Of course, Shell and Eni have previously denied any wrongdoing in the case. Meanwhile, Zimbabwe has praised China's growing partnership with African countries. President Emerson Mnangagwa has commended the Asian giant for being a friend to all and willing to assist many countries in different sectors through mutually beneficial projects.
Zimbabwean President Emerson Mnangagwa has applauded China for the various projects it continues to implement with other countries. The country is leading the Belt and Road Initiative and recently reaffirmed its commitment to work with African countries at the FOCAC summit.
We are aware of certain people and corners of the world criticizing the role and assistance, developmental assistance coming to Africa is being criticized by some quarters. Let me assure you that such criticism is not fair, because I meet these people in Beijing looking for money.
Through the Belt and Road Initiative, China has signed cooperation documents with more than 140 countries and international organizations, including Zimbabwe. Through the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation, China will contribute to industrial promotion, infrastructure, trade facilitation, peace and security in various African countries.
China has become the powerhouse for world economic development. China has also offered a great platform for mutually beneficial cooperation and common development.
Zimbabwe's friendship with China is not new. The two countries have been working together since before independence, and the friendship has now developed into a comprehensive strategic partnership. African countries are also seeking to tap into the 1.4 billion people market that the world's second largest economy, China, provides. Astatal, CGTN.
Meanwhile, Ethiopia's Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed, Djibouti's President Ismail Omar Guelleh, and Sudanese President Omar al-Bashir have all opened the Chinese-built Jimma Industrial Park in Ethiopia's western town of Jimma. Now, this is some 350 kilometers west of the capital, Addis Ababa. The park is set to benefit not only the local community, but also Ethiopia's economy in general, due to its strategic position. Now, it was built by Chinese construction giant, China Communications Construction Company. It is expected to host investors in light manufacturing, especially agro-processing, textile and apparel products. Now, Jimma Industrial Park is part of the Ethiopian government's grand plan to transform the country's largely agrarian economy into an industrialized middle-income country by 2025.
For all industrial park, the client required us only 9 months, and also is DB. Design and building. Design almost will need 3 months. So for actually construction time only 6 months. And this industrial park in the future, I think, for the manufacture, the main year for the light manufacture, like textile and also agriculture.
And in South Africa, quite a few digital banks have set up shop in the country over the last year, and any one of them could potentially shake up the financial services sector. For years now, the market has been dominated by 5 major banks, but cost-conscious customers are now looking for more differentiation in products as well as services, and of course a price. Here's CGTN Richard Nta exploring their prospects in Africa's most industrialized economy.
Capitec launched back in 2001, shaking up South Africa's small banking industry. Its focus was affordability and greater access to financial products using new technology. 17 years later, the banking industry is set for another shake-up with digital banking. Time Bank's digital platform has just become operational. Bank Zero and Discovery Bank are expected to launch in the next few months.
Time Digital is a pure digital bank that focuses on the retail and the small business segment. And our passion is really around underserved consumers. We have no branches, we have no paper forms to fill in, we have no queues. We bring banking to you, and we're not expecting you to come to us.
But some are skeptical whether these banks will offer a full digital experience.
I'm not too sure South Africa is going to deliver the full completely digital bank, front end at the core, back end. I do suspect and do have a feeling that it might come out of East Africa.
Streamlined ease of use and reduced cost is exactly what has held back the bigger banks. They've tried to introduce products that seem to address those issues, but don't really. Because, for example, when they introduce an app that supposedly makes banking easier, the app is really just a front end to a very complex back end.
South Africa already has efficient online and mobile banking offerings, but in order to properly penetrate this market with digital banking, new ventures will need to offer a wide range of products and services using electronic technology, even without the use of the internet. Right now, most offerings are app-based. These apps require data, which is expensive in South Africa. To date, just 14 million of 45 million mobile users in the country have access to the internet.
Banks in the future will provide unitary services into other industries like retailers. Digital banking is about knowing the customer and being able to meet the customer where they are. So, meeting a customer that has just woken up and that lives in Alex and that needs to do a transaction on a USSD phone versus a capable individual that works in Sandton, right, that is tech savvy.
Legacy banks are starting to take the digital route to grow their market share and entice younger customers. But it remains to be seen whether these new fintech players will be able to offer a real digital bank in the true sense of the word. Richard Nta, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
And heading to Egypt now, one of the largest investment companies there is setting up a refinery in what's considered to be the largest public-private partnership infrastructure project on the continent. Well, Yasser Hakim spoke with Ahmed Haikal. He's the founder and CEO of Kala Holdings at the Africa 2018 Forum in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt. Now, here's part of their conversation on the investment climate in African economies.
Legal frameworks are important, but equally important, probably more important, is the response of policymakers towards problems on the ground. So imagine I go to a country and I'm starting to put an investment. Unless I feel that there is very strong support backing the solution of everyday problems that occur in those countries, some of those problems are debilitating, like transporting of equipment from the ports to the site. You think of that as, so what's the big deal? No, this is a huge deal. You cannot do that without the support of the government.
What do you look for when you decide to enter a country or invest in a country? What are the ingredients you look for in that country before you take that step?
It's a different factors, a multifactorial decision-making, population size, ease of doing business, availability of infrastructure. It's a multitude of things, but certainly government support. Without government support, we're not going to start.
You've been investing in Africa for nearly 25 years. How different has it been in the last few years? Are there any improvements for you?
there is a huge improvement in the way business is conducted. Otherwise, I would not be putting more money in Africa. Qal'a now, our main focus for the time being is to make sure that the Egyptian refining company is on track and that it's stable in its operation. This is our first priority. Second priority is to make sure that all the expansions that we're doing in all of our companies in Egypt are on track. So we are in anticipation of that. We're making huge investments in Egypt. So this is taking a lot of our focus.
Tell us more about Al-Qala'a's latest investments and your plan for Africa in the next few years.
2 years from now, in my view, we will be looking at taking many of our companies into many places in Africa. This is what we typically do. We use a company in Egypt as the springboard, the platform to expand in Africa. We've done this in cement multiple times. We've done this in mining multiple times. The countries that are most of interest to me in Africa are as follows. Ghana is an important country and the reforms are extremely interesting. Côte d'Ivoire is interesting. Nigeria is very interesting. Mozambique is hugely interesting. Kenya and Uganda remains to be extremely interesting for us. Sudan, Ethiopia and Sudan.
Well, that's all for now on Africa Live Biz. But coming up on Global Business Africa, we turn our focus to South African Airways, its financial troubles, and the road to recovery against increasing competition from other airlines. Of course, all that coming up top of the hour. For now, back to you, Richard.
All right, thank you, Uche. It's time now for a short break. We've got your sports news coming up next. Here's a sneak peek at what's up ahead. South Africa's Cameron van der Berg set a new swimming championship record in the men's 100 meters breaststroke in China.
When you look at Africa, what do you really see? Do you see fast-growing, endless deserts and parched earth? Or do you see the biggest opportunity for an agricultural revolution in a generation? Do you see crowded, unplanned cities or vast, untapped markets? Do you see a population at risk, or do you see a billion-strong opportunity to grow the next wave of multi-billion-dollar firms in Africa? When you look at Africa, what do you really see? Join us in Global Business and see Africa through our eyes. The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Qanata, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Africa, where champions are made, records are broken, legends are born. We're there for every goal, for every knockout, for every step of the way.
Match Point, only on CGTN.
Welcome back. We begin with swimming, turning to the second day of action at the 2018 FINA World Swimming Championships on Wednesday in Hangzhou, China. South Africa's Cameron van der Berg set a new championship record of 56.01 seconds in the men's 100 meters breaststroke. Swimmers from the United States dominated most of the action, meanwhile winning 5 of the 8 finals at stake. Success began with a new world record